So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. Is there a leader in you? How to prepare for leadership. Casey Blonsky is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Learning Solutions at the American Management Association. He is a recognized thought leader in the fields of learning strategies, customer experience, and leadership development. Casey holds degrees in both marketing and organizational development from Post University. The American Management Association helps individuals and organizations realize their potential through effective learning solutions. Look to AMA to fuel your innovation, enable your agility, and execute on strategy. Today's presentation will explore leadership roles as a strategist, change agent, coach, manager, communicator, mentor, and team member, as well as the importance of developing one's own leadership style for maximum impact. Please join me in welcoming Casey Blonsky to the virtual stage.
Thanks, Matt. And hi, everybody. Australia, I'm blown away that you're here, but I appreciate it. And I hope it's time worthwhile instead of sleeping. To everyone else, thanks so much. I am based in Tampa, Florida, so I'm coming to you from the Sunshine State. I'm very excited about this topic and to talk to you about it today. But a side note for those of you that don't know AMA, as Matt shared, we help individuals and organizations realize the potential through effective learning solutions and really focusing on the investment on their human capital, which we believe is the only competitive differentiation in an organization. And actually today is our 100th birthday. So we were founded as a nonprofit association 100 years ago today. So it's kind of a big deal for us. But let's turn to the topic. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today around this subject because I believe that leadership is an ever-evolving role dependent upon external and internal factors that are constantly changing. 7 days from now, think about it, 7 days from now is the 2-year anniversary when the US shut down its economy due to the COVID pandemic. And just think about the changes that have occurred in your own personal lives as well as our work lives within 2 years. And then as we came out of the pandemic, all the things that have changed. So if you think about it from a business perspective, let's take a look at, and as soon as I can get this to move, there we go. Look at business post-pandemic and think about all the things that we've gone through. Some organizations have a hiring freeze on. We're hearing a lot about layoffs. We hear about quiet quitting, those people that are going to stay, but have kind of sat back and retired. There's more conversation around work-life balance. So how do we manage this, especially in a virtual world now where many of us are working? Supply chain issues. Has anybody tried to buy a car recently and all of a sudden you realize they don't have them on the lot? All trying to get our work done with supply chain challenges. How are we doing more with less? Not everybody came back to work, so we're having to kind of reconfigure teams. Some are in an office, some are virtual. How do we build that up? How do we manage the culture? You know, it's the economy, stupid. How many times are we hearing, especially here in the United States, recession or inflation or shutdown, and now banks challenges and so on. Member engagement. So for those of us that may have membership or even customers, how are they engaged? Have they changed? Are they more virtual? Are they more in person? What are they looking for? Employee retention. How do we keep those that we currently have? And how do we attract more? How do we manage the board? So from an engagement standpoint, most of us work with public companies. What is the board expectations? How are we managing that? And how do we increase productivity and all that we have? So just think of those bullets and all of those being managed through leadership. And what does leaders look for? here's some sobering statistics that we uncovered pre-pandemic, and then we went back and looked at them again, and they're still true. 58% of managers said they didn't receive any management training. So those that are in place of leaders and managers, 58% never got there. Most organizations hire from inside and they promote from within. So you may be a great frontline worker, but then you get promoted to supervisor, to manager, to leader, without having the true leadership skills that are necessary. This one is very sobering. $1 trillion in annual waste is due to inefficient management. And that's from both the employee side, as well as the production side, as well as the output side. $1 trillion. And then this one is shocking as well. 59% of employees trust strangers more than their own managers. So let that sink in, that we trust people we don't even know compared to our managers who we may work with every single day. Throughout the presentation, I want to share some quotes from people in history. And this is an oldie but a goodie. And if those of you that know who this is, I give you a thumbs up. But I couldn't find a picture of this guy, but this is Aristotle. And what he shared is, he who cannot be a good follower cannot be a good leader. And I think that is also true today. We're not a hierarchical society. Many organizations set themselves up that way. And we may set up ourselves in the organization in silos. So you have accounting and marketing and sales and productivity and research and development. But customers experience us horizontally. And leaders play a huge part in managing that type of component. As a matter of fact, today's leaders are realizing that there's a balance of focus needed to help organizations achieve their objectives. No longer is it just oversight of people and getting tasks done, but realizing their role and responsibilities in driving both employee experience and employee engagement, as well as ultimately customer engagement. And again, when we look at some of the statistics we found, we're not doing a great job on any of these as leaders. So let's look at employee experience. 63% of companies say retaining employees is harder than hiring them. And especially in today's economy, and especially here in the US, finding people has been more and more difficult. So retention is a key strategy for most organizations. 13% of employees are fully satisfied with their work experiences. 13. That means 87% are not fully satisfied. And is satisfaction really the target of what we're trying to achieve here? And then what employees are looking for in their experience is a positive culture, well-being benefits, a sense of purpose, and more communication and positive affirmation from management. Usually we don't hear from leaders and managers unless it's negative, or if it's corrective, or if it's negative feedback, or talking to you almost as a subordinate rather than a team player. When you look at employee engagement, and yes, we define those as two different things, because without employee experience driving a positive work environment, we won't be actively engaged. Think of it in your own life, no matter what role you're in currently. If you are not satisfied or loyal in the experience, how engaged are you? And these stats prove that. If you think 85% of employees globally said they're not fully engaged or actively disengaged, there is the quiet quitting. 85%. 60% are emotionally detached, and 19% are miserable. I pray none of you are in that 19%, but I get it if you are. In previous roles, I was miserable and couldn't wait to get out. But think about that. Whose responsibility is that? 52% say leadership could have kept them from leaving, but only a third had an exit interview. And I've been guilty of that myself as a leader. I've had people resign and I kind of go, okay, I get it. You found another job. Good luck to you. Without really understanding, hey, let me pick your brain for a second. What went wrong? What could have been done differently? What could I do differently as a leader? We don't want to have those conversations, but that feedback is critical to us to impact everything else. Now, ultimately, employee experience, employee engagement drive customer experience. And so when you're looking at customer experience, 71% of consumers said customer service at large businesses stayed the same or got worse post-pandemic. Post-pandemic. This is where I'd like you to put on two hats. If you're a leader or working in an organization, but also as a consumer, where do you go to shop? Where do you go for your dry cleaning? Where do you go to get your car washed or what have you? Why do you go to those? And especially if the service got worse, especially now with the internet and the multi-channels that we now have to gain things, it is critical to think about the customer experience as an organization and how do we keep our customers loyal. Companies risk losing 9.5% of their revenue due to bad customer experiences. Now, I don't know what your revenue is. I know what mine is, and I can't afford to lose 9.5 or 10% of my revenue due to bad experiences. So we focus a great deal on our customer experience, and we work backwards for that. And I'll talk about that in a second. 6 in 10 US consumers believe companies should have resolved COVID-related issues by now. Here's the interesting thing. We're not talking about COVID anymore. Yet, in the United States, a person dies from COVID every 5 minutes. So COVID is still here and it is still scary. But what this says to me is people don't want to use it as an excuse anymore. Organizations can't say, well, because of COVID or because of what we've done post-COVID or what we were doing, remember pre-COVID. Nobody wants to hear it anymore. We are basically, quote unquote, COVID out. So customer experience is critical. Let me give you an example. I have a great friend who is a Disney Imagineer. I live in Florida. We don't pay state income tax, mostly because of Disney and all of you guys who come to Florida and visit Disney World. But when they design, and he shared this with me, when they design a ride, they design it based on the customer experience they want to create. So they actually create the ride from the exit back into the ride. So Disney is about to open up Tron here in Florida, and I was able to ride it. They want to first say, what do we want the customers to say? What do we want them to do? How do we want them to behave? Once they identify the outcomes they're looking for, they design the ride throughout, all the way through the queue line, to make sure that they drive that type of experience. Then they look at the cast member, as they call their employees, and talk about what kind of experience do we want to create through the cast member. And that really relies on how engaged that employee is, that cast member is, to help drive that type of experience. When they do this, he shared, they can understand 96% of a customer's experience from the queue line all the way to the exit and what they're going to say about the ride. They have that mapped out, so they know what they're trying to create. That is not just the organization's responsibility. That is leadership's responsibility, and we'll talk about that in a second. When you think about leadership today, and when you look at these statistics, there are really two focus areas for leadership. There is the human component and the business component. Employees are human, so we must enter on the human. In any interaction, there are these two components. There's the human. How do I drive an experience that engages them to help solve the business issue? And what we're expecting is a balance of the human and business focus. However, at the exit, we always want to exit on the human. We enter on the human, we exit on the human. And that's because whether the experience is positive, neutral, or negative, that forms a lasting behavior in our customer as well as our employees. So leaders need to be cognizant of their communication style and how effective they are in driving that type of experience. Let's go back to those stats that we just shared and look at them again in through your own eyes. And would you say that leaders can positively impact these statistics by focusing on the human or focusing on the business side of the equation? So if you look at, for example, retaining employees is harder than hiring them, what is the challenge of retention? Granted, it could be pay, it could be others, but there is enough history out there and enough research that says that pay is not the driving force. It is the relationship between the employee and manager and employee and peers. So is that a human or is that a business? When you look at employee engagement, when you look at 60% of people are emotionally detached at work and 19% are miserable, is that a human or is that a business focus? We're talking about emotions here, and we're talking about disengagement. Is that a human or a business? And when you look at 71% of consumers saying business stayed the same or got worse, is that a human or a business? When we screw up, and we all screw up at work or even in our personal lives, the first thing we do is apologize, or we understand the impact on an individual or on the work itself. It's a human experience. So my challenge to you is think about all that we're doing, because leaders have a responsibility to drive the human quotient in employee experience, engagement, and customer experience. That is critical. So this is a great skills gap report, and this is the most in-demand soft skills that companies are looking for in their leaders as well as their employees. Number one is problem solving, time management, and ability to adapt to change. I would challenge that a little bit and say we're looking for employees and leaders that have the ability to adapt to change, because it is critical. Things are not staying the same. I guarantee you, in your organization, things may change hourly. So ultimately, you're looking for people that are willing to work in this unknown of change that is currently affecting everyone. The other part of this that I have a challenge with is the term soft skills. I absolutely hate that term. And we always talk about hard skill, soft skill. Hard skill, learning Excel, that's a hard skill. PowerPoint, hard skill. Soft skill, friendly, responsible, paying attention to one's feelings. The number one challenge of organizations in recruitment and retention of finding and keeping people who master the art of the human factor is the #1 complaint in most organizations. We can't find people with the attitude. We hire for aptitude, not attitude. Well, attitude has completely jumped to the forefront in organizations because now we're working with diverse talent. We're working with teams that are spread across regions, some in office, some hybrid. How do we maintain a culture? How do we maintain a cohesiveness? How do we work and make sure that everyone feels valued? How do we make sure that there's not animosity between those in the office and those working from home? Those are all soft skills that leaders need to have. So I prefer to call these essential skills because many organizations pre-pandemic didn't pay any attention to the importance of these skills. And many leadership behaviors were focused on do as I say, don't do as I do. That doesn't work for today's employee, especially those if you're looking to build a cohesive, engaged, and motivated team, as we already showed in those statistics. So when you look at these soft skills, think about it in your own life. For those of you that are managers, leaders, or even just individual contributors, where are you on the spectrum of problem solving, time management, the ability to adapt to change, your leadership ability, which obviously we'll talk about more, your creativity, communication, building. I would add another one, your innovation. How often are you bringing ideas to the organization? How willing are you to bring ideas to your organization? Is it an environment that allows you to be creative? I think we all know this guy a little bit better. As Bill Gates says, as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. So we can't do it alone. The one thing that needs to change is the perception of the leader is the know-all and see-all guy or girl. Just doesn't exist. I don't know everything, and I manage a full team throughout the United States. I expect them to be open to ideas, but I'm open to their ideas. I don't have all the answers, but together we can find those answers. And I think that is really the crux of this. And when you think about leadership focus, this is a study by McKinsey. They identified 5 areas that need to be focused on for leadership: communication, coordination, connection, creativity, and culture. Let's break this down. Communication. How often do we communicate? How do we communicate? How do we leverage others to do communication for us? Do we do weekly one-on-ones with our team? Do we do quarterly meetings? Do we do bi-weekly meetings? How are we keeping people abreast of situations? One statistic that was shared by HBR was employees today demand an understanding of what's in it for them and what's in it for the organization. So in our communications, are we talking about their role and responsibility, our expectations, and what type of communication is transferable to the individual? Meaning, what can I take from this and use in my personal development? Coordination. How are we working together? As leaders, it was very difficult. My team was always dispersed regionally. So many worked from home. I did have some in offices. And then comes March 20th and everybody was home. So how do I coordinate the workflows in that type of environment? And as we slowly came back to what we considered the norm, some in office, some at home, my leadership style had to change to really build the coordination to make sure we were still hitting our goals and objectives, but working in a unique environment. So how did I communicate differently? How did I coordinate the processes? And then connection. How am I connecting people? How am I personally connecting to the team? And how are they connecting to one another? How are they connecting to the organization as a whole? So how are we transferring their knowledge to the organization to make changes as well as new ideas? So the connection becomes critical, and leaders need to focus on how we're doing that. Creativity. One thing that fell by the wayside over the last 2 years was innovation in organizations. Too many companies were just focused on surviving through the pandemic. And as we came out of the pandemic, they were rushing to get back to the norm. Well, the norm isn't there anymore. You know, there is a study called the Castle Report that shows how many people are back in offices in various cities and locales. And I can tell you, our headquarters is based in New York City. Only 47% of the people that worked in New York City are back full time. So how are we innovating by this dispersed audience? And what do we need to do? Because as consumers and as customers of these organizations, our needs, our wants, our flexibility has also changed. So how are we currently innovating? And as leaders, how are we forging an environment that bridges that gap between managing the today and thinking about the future? The largest hit that organizations have seen is culture. And again, leaders who are used to being in offices that are now dispersed, or they have been dispersed, how are they maintaining the culture of an organization? How has the vision and mission of organizations and companies changed to really mold the culture that we're looking for in the future? How is our culture addressing leadership responsibilities to the front line, who ultimately drive the customer experience, which ultimately drives revenue, cost, and risk? So understanding our leadership's focus around this is necessary. So when you think about leadership, you think about it in two ways. It really is a marriage of trust and credibility. So to be heard by others and to be able to gain attention and impact, you need to be perceived as credible and trustworthy. And I'm going to say that again. You need to be perceived as credible and trustworthy. Get out of your shell and think about it as a leader, as an individual contributor. What perception am I giving out of credibility and trustworthiness? Because they go hand in hand with each other. So perception is not what I believe, it's what you believe as my trustworthiness and my credibility. So let's look at the competencies of both of those. And think about these in the context of the two areas of focus we discussed earlier, the human and the business, and where these competencies fall. So the first one is, you got to be knowledgeable. You have to understand what the business is, what you're trying to achieve. You also have to be experienced. You know, the one thing I do is I've managed a sales force for American Management Association nationally within North America. And the experience that I bring is that I actually was a salesperson for years before I moved into management. And so the experience that I've had in selling builds my credibility that I understand what we're up against and what we're trying to achieve. I can see it through my salesperson's eyes who are out there every day selling our programs, our services, our consulting to our customers. So experience, your confidence. How confident are you? And confidence does not mean that you have all the answers. Confidence is knowing when you don't have the answer and you say, I don't know, but I can find it. You know, the one thing I've always taught my kids who are not kids anymore, but a smart person knows the answer, a smarter person knows where to get the answer. So confidence is critical in this. Being informed. And informed does not just mean reading, but listening to others. And really digesting what is being told to you and how it's being communicated to you. Human or business. Being fair. And I think this is something that we need to talk about and think about in our own lives. How are we fair? As leaders, we may have a diverse group of employees. Some we may like more than others, but how are we fair in our actions, in our communication? How are we being perceived as fair? We may feel we're fair, but if the perception's not there, not good. It's not good. So fair. Being concerned, showing empathy, understanding, seek to understand. One of Covey's 7 habits and one that I truly believe in is seek to understand and show that concern that you're willing to help and you're willing to listen. Be consistent. And again, as a leader, this can be difficult at times. How are you consistent to maybe that employee that you like and that employee that kind of rubs you the wrong way? But how are you consistent? As a frontline worker, how are you being perceived as consistent? Hopefully in a positive way, not a negative way, but how are you being perceived as consistent? Optimistic. Nothing drives me more nuts than someone who is optimistic to your face, but says in your back it'll never work. Or, I really like that guy. I can't stand him to others. So optimistic is, how are you looking at things, especially in this world where things are changing so rapidly, that optimism is critical. And is that a human or is it a business component? So again, think about it. It's not a soft skill, it's an essential skill. How are you being perceived as optimistic? And again, keep that word in your mind, perception. And are you assertive? Are you, as a leader, the person that makes the decision and moves forward, believes in it, is optimistic about the answer and the outcome that you're looking for, and building that motivation and that engagement in a way that isn't hierarchical? You're not the boss, but how are you assertive in, if we get this done, this will be the outcome? And how do you get a team to follow you? How are you enthusiastic? Again, if the leader is showing any type of negativity, that will flow down to your team. And believe it or not, it'll hurt you more than it will hurt the team. So again, that enthusiasm, it can't be canned, but you need to really be able to have that skill to figure out, how do I get enthusiastic about that? We've all done things that we can't stand and we don't like doing. But more importantly, how are we enabling and showing people that we're enthusiastic about the outcome? And finally, active. How are we active? Let's use the example of going to training or doing something that our boss asks us to do. How many times have you gone in and they say, hey, I need you to go to this, and you ask why? And they say, I don't know. They just asked for you to go. That's passive leadership. That's throwing it to you and you go figure it out, you go do it. Active leadership is, hey, you were invited to this. Let me share with you what it's about, and let me talk to you about expectations once you come out of this. And I'm very excited about you being volunteered to go or asked to attend. Active leadership is being a part of the solution, building that camaraderie. No more do you have to be feared as a leader. The most successful leaders are those that build a team around them that protects them, that actually drives for the success of the leader, and the leader that drives the success for the team. How are they actively leading the team? And again, perception. It's not what you believe, it's what the people underneath you believe and what your peers believe to be true. And finally, the man I'd love to be, although he goes to McDonald's way too much and I have to lose weight, Warren Buffett says leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. So again, think about that, translating vision into reality. We're all doing that every single day, is how do we translate vision into reality to drive an engaged workforce to ultimately drive to the objectives that we're up against. So when you think about those three areas of employee experience, employee engagement, and customer experience, leadership has two roles. They have talent strategy and they have the business strategy. If you're a leader only focusing on the business, how do these three get done? How do they get done? When you're only focused on the talent, how does the business get done? It is a balancing act for leaders today on balancing the human and the business, the talent with the business. And you can see below what the outcomes are with positive leadership and the skills that are necessary. You will have enhanced engagement. You'll have greater retention, increased acquisition. You'll have increased productivity, greater motivation, increased revenue, increased satisfaction of your customer or membership base. So leaders are pivotal in driving customer experience, customer engagement, customer experience. So let's take a look at some of the leadership do's. And this really comes from some of the research that we have done at American Management Association in working with many organizations of leaders and such. And I kind of drilled them down into a few bullets. Take more chances. You know, fast failures are always better than drawn out mediocrity. So the importance of embracing the learnings you derive from failure, like they allow you to reevaluate what you're doing and how to improve where you may have previously overlooked. You know, these experiences make you a better leader, a better manager, and a stronger asset to the business. Stay true to yourself. A lot of people said, oh, you know, to be a leader, I have to be an extrovert. That's not the case. Stay true to yourself. You know you. How do you provide the perception that we just talked about while maintaining your true self? You know, if you're outgoing and gregarious, great. How do you use that to your advantage? If you're much more controlled and much more analytical, great. How do you use that to your advantage? How do you use that in your team conversations? Here's one that a lot of people forget about. Networking is part of your job. Treat building those relationships like it's your job. There are people less capable than you are who will invest in networking and building those relationships and be advantaged as a result. Building those relationships are part of your job, whether it's inside your own companies or outside, networking with peers of similar titles or going to industry events. How you network makes you known, builds that perception of understanding, credibility, knowledge, all of those pieces that we talked about. Networking is critical. So I highly recommend you look around and find those types of peer groups, as well as internally, how you network. Have patience. Don't let outside influences push you to prioritize speed. You know, I remember when I got out of college and I had my first job, the one thing that I always was concerned about was I got to get going. I got to move. I can't stay in the front line anymore. I got to move up. I want to be a supervisor. I want to be a manager. Take your time. Take your time. Learn as much as possible in the role that you're currently in. Use it to your advantage to drive the perceptions that we were talking about earlier. Have patience. It'll come. Gain global experience. And what I mean by that is not global experience by, oh, if I have divisions in Europe or in Asia or in the Middle East or in South America, I need to understand all of those. That's great. But also have global experience around your own organization. Too many times, leaders are set up in those silos that we talked about. You need to think about, where do I expand? How do I learn what marketing does? How do I learn what HR does? How do I learn what manufacturing does or sales does, or all of those? Gain a global experience of your organization. It will only add to your advantage of moving up in an organization and being the most well-rounded leader that you can be. Look for ways to accelerate your career. And what I mean by that is, don't become complacent. And this is something that I talk to my own kids about, but also with my team. Don't be complacent where you are. Look for ways to accelerate your career. And we talked about a lot of that, from the competencies that it takes to what you should be doing around taking more chances, networking, staying true to yourself, having that patience, but also look for opportunity. What ideas do you have? How do you motivate your team? How do they become your best PR agency inside your own organization? So critically look for ways to accelerate your career. You know, we talk about, how do you project that positive image? Well, you do it through the perception of others. It's not just you, but it's perception of others. And when you think about perception, you also have to talk about value. So as a leader, what value are you bringing to the company? What value are you bringing to your team? And what value are you bringing to yourself? Because perceived value is the most important thing. Perceived value creates the opportunities for you to accelerate your career. So that's really all that I wanted to share today. It gives you a lot to think about of, as a leader or moving into leadership, what do I need to focus on? What do I need to do? If I had to leave you with two things: one, focus on the human and the business side of all interactions that you have, whether it be as a peer or as a peer to manager, manager to manager, manager to your team, or leader to your management team, to your frontline. How are you balancing the human and the business component? And the other is perception. Too often we become entirely in-focused, and think about the perception that you're giving to others in the organization to allow you to move up in the organization to those greater roles, to more responsibility, to impact the organization differently. So with that, I thank you so much for taking the time. We have some time for questions if there are any, but I do want to leave you with my email address and my cell phone number. If any of you have any questions or want more information or want to just have a conversation about this, do not hesitate to either give me a call or send me a text at my cell phone or drop me an email. I would love to talk to you about this, because this is exactly what I love to do, what American Management does on a daily basis. And more importantly, my goal is to see you succeed. So again, thank you guys so much. I thank Beta Gamma for this opportunity, and I'll turn it back to you, Matt, and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for a fantastic discussion today. Really appreciate it. We do have a couple of questions that popped in here. So I'm going to start from the top. So the first one I have here is it better to communicate via email or in voice?
So I would leave it to you this way. What is most conducive in your organization? If you are only talking one-on-one or to a team by voice, make sure that your emails equal the same. The one challenge on email is that you cannot hear the tone or the focus or the actual voice modulation that you have in your communication. So in my personal, I spread it out. I do have email communications when it's much more business focused around here's our goal, here's where we are, here's our plan. But I also have weekly communications with the team to talk to them about the same business objectives, but we also bring in the human element around what we need to do, how do we need to be more engaged and such. So I would have you decide what is the best way to communicate the message that you're trying to convey to the team.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Sure.
Another question here. What books or resources do you recommend for aspiring leaders?
Well, the one that I kind of jumped on early was the book Good to Great. And it really talks about the organizations and certain organizations and how they changed from good to great. And in there are a whole bunch of conversations around how they perceived leadership when they were good and how they altered it to become great. That is a great application book around leadership. From a leadership style, you know, it's hard to pinpoint one. You know, 7 Habits, Stephen Covey's book, is still valuable around certain aspects. But I would leave it to you to think about, okay, so I heard all of this around the skill set. I heard all this on what I need to do and the do's and how to focus, but where am I lacking? What are some of the skills that I need to think about? And then I would just Google that. Obviously, I'm pro American Management Association, and we've got tons of resources around leadership that you're welcome to look at on our website or have the conversation with me. I can get you in touch with others that can share that with you. I will offer up on our website, amanet.org. There are 2 assessments. There is an individual skills assessment and there is a team assessment. So if you're a leader and you would like to understand where are the gaps between your current state and where you're headed, take the team. If it's for you, I highly recommend you take the individual. It's free. Take it and it'll show you what the gaps are from where you currently are to where you want to go. And then you can key on those key essential skills that are necessary, or even the hard skills that are necessary for you to move on up.
Thank you very much. And thank you, McKenna, for dropping all those links into the chat there for the book and for the assessment. If you guys haven't had a chance to check those out, look at the chat there and you can take a look at those as well.
Perfect.
So we have a couple more questions here. This one asks if you have any tips for networking.
So the way I've networked, I'll just use my personal. I look at, so I have responsibility for sales leadership, as I said, as well as more of our consulting around our solution set. So I Googled sales enablement, sales leadership, networking sessions. I've looked at conferences around sales development, sales process. I've looked at consulting. So that's how I've networked externally. I've also looked at industries that were close to me, that I love to identify with and try to figure out ways to penetrate them for AMA and my previous organizations. So I may look at some industry pieces like American Banking Association or National Retail Federation or others that are out there. Internally, I used to schedule a 15-minute call with others. So for example, I scheduled a 15-minute call with the CEO of my former organization just to pick her brain around certain things that she was thinking about or what she would look at, things that concerned her, things that were impressive to her. I did that with marketing. How do we go to market? What are some of the ways that we should be thinking about digital marketing versus social selling? So it's really taking the initiative of looking for those areas that interest you, that you believe could be well-rounded. I would look for those that are looking to move into leadership, look for some leadership associations. For those of you that may be in HR, I would look at SHRM and look at some of those other titled associations that you may go after. But there are tons of networking opportunities out there, as well as inside the industry and your organization.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love the idea of the 15-minute calls for some internal networking. Just a really smart, quick way to kind of get some insight.
Yeah, and it's good press for yourself. So again, perception, if you're taking that initiative, that's being perceived as a positive. So I highly recommend. And just do 15 minutes. I guarantee you'll have a secondary conversation that'll go a little longer, but just say, I just need 15 minutes. I have a couple of questions I'd love to pick your brain on.
I love it. Let's see. Is it a good idea to do out-of-office activities to improve your leadership?
Yeah. So I coached my son's soccer team when he was younger. I didn't coach anything on my daughter because she was a cheerleader and then in volleyball, and I left that alone. But yeah, I looked at other areas. I'm on the board of Make-A-Wish Foundation. I am on a couple boards of universities. So yeah, expanding my leadership to others outside of my industry has been awesome. And I've learned as much as I've shared, probably more in learning. So I highly recommend you look outside. Plus, again, it's that work-life balance. You may love your work, but can I use it in other areas? And that's what I've done. So I highly recommend that.
All right. Let's see. What was the biggest thing you learned about leadership from your first leadership role?
That I didn't know everything. You kind of get this puffy chest that you get promoted. So my career was very kind of different. I started in a huge organization, General Electric, and I was put in their management development program. And that first part was awesome. I thought, okay, I'm going to be the next Jack Welch at the time. But it showed me what I didn't know about leading and managing, going through that 2 year of curriculum and application in all various areas. Then I left and I became an individual contributor again in marketing. And I really wanted to understand why marketing hated sales and sales hated marketing. So I moved over to the sales role and I became a salesperson. And the first perception I had of sales was, I am not a car salesman. What do I need to do today to get you in this thing? But I learned. And as I learned and became better at selling, I was promoted into a sales manager role, and then a sales leader role, and then I became a VP of new business development. And all the way up, I knew what I knew, but I also recognized what I didn't know, and I searched that out. And I was able to take programs and courses and seminars, and I got certifications to make sure that I was understanding the skill set, but I also wanted to apply it. So I looked at application, and I would talk to my manager. What do I need? What do I don't need? Feedback, and we hear this and we'll all roll our eyes together, okay? Feedback is a gift. It was a gift to have the feedback from my peers as well as my leaders to help me grow into leadership. I'm now a senior vice president, report directly to the CEO. I don't have all the answers, and I don't pretend to have all the answers. And I think that's critical for all leaders, is to be humble enough and emotionally intelligent enough to go, I don't have all the answers. I will work to find them, but I personally can't make that quick decision because I don't know the answer. Hope that helps.
I love it. Yeah. Just accepting that you don't know everything, I think is incredibly important. And having, listening to the people around you, having good people around you that can help fill those gaps and things, really important.
And don't be embarrassed that you don't know the answer. Don't be embarrassed. I guarantee you, your CEO does not have all the answers.
Yeah.
So,
do you have any comments or data specifically related to female leaders, and any advice you have for women in leadership?
I thank you for that question. Yes, I do. And if you email me, I can send you a whole bunch of things. We actually at AMA have a women's leadership conference. And I'm not sure who gave that question, but we'll be around the country this whole year working with females and women in leadership. So I have data, I have a ton of research that we've done. We have programs around it. It is critical. As a matter of fact, I just saw a stat yesterday because we have an event coming up March 29th in Washington, D.C. around women in leadership for the federal government, that women are now making up a majority of the workforce in the US. And yet they are only about 13% of the leadership. And so it is critical to focus on the diversity and the needs and the differentiation between women leaders and male leaders, and how do they function in kind of a male-dominated environment. So yes, I have tons of that. Send me an email or send me a text and I'll be happy to get in touch with you and send you all that you're looking for. I can even put you in contact to our head of women's leadership as well. She would love to have the conversation with you.
Thank you, Casey. And thank you, McKenna, for linking the Women's Leadership Certification Program in the chat there. Well, we are just right up to the end of the presentation today. I know there's a couple more questions. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to get to them right now, but I do appreciate everyone for joining us today. Thank you for hopping on, telling us a little bit about yourselves, and sharing your questions. And I also want to thank Casey for a fantastic presentation, as always, honestly, and being willing to share his email and his information with you guys if you guys are interested in reaching out to him. Thank you guys so much.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.